Welcome back to another impactful episode of the PSTA podcast. I am Craig King, your host, and we have a special treat for you today. We have the amazing, the phenomenal Kathy Maness, Executive Director of Palmetto State Teachers Association. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Craig. I'm glad to be here.
So how you doing today?
I'm great.
How was your Easter weekend?
It was good. It was a lot of fun, a lot of rest.
And I'm sure you played with that granddaughter of yours too.
For a little while I did.
I bet you did. So today we just want to talk to you about your journey with PSTA, but also why it's so important for teachers to join PSTA. So talk about your early education career, where you started, how you got your start, what motivated you to become a teacher, and then we'll jump into our work with PSTA.
Well, thank you, Craig. I am a proud graduate of the University of South Carolina. My undergrad was in elementary education. My master's is in early childhood, and then I went to Winthrop, where I got the certification I needed for administration. But I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a teacher. That's all I ever wanted to do. My poor brother and my baby dolls and teddy bears would have to go downstairs in our basement where I had a school room, and I would teach him. And so that's all I ever wanted to do was be a teacher. In fact, when I got married, I had a lot of children in my wedding, and somebody said to me, I've never seen a bride sit down and read a book to children, but I was always meant to be a teacher. And I taught third grade at Irwin Elementary in Lancaster, South Carolina. And we would always have these big meetings at the beginning of the year when all the teachers would be together. Well, this lady got up to talk about Palmetto State Teachers Association. Her name is Betsy Rushing, and I'd known her and her family for a long time. I had a lot of respect for her, and I said, I'm going to look into that. And so I did and got very involved, became a member of the board, and then made my way up to be the president of Palmetto State Teachers Association while I was teaching third grade. And our association started growing at that time, and we had to hire somebody else. Well, Dr. Elizabeth Gressett, who was our first president and first executive director of Palmetto State Teachers Association, hired me. She knew that I was very political. I loved politics. My family was political. My daddy was an elected official. And so that was something that PSTA needed. They needed a lobbyist. So I came from a third grade classroom to be the lobbyist for PSTA. And it's real interesting. It was interesting at that time. Things were a lot different. We didn't have to fight so hard for public education back then as we do now. And I tell a lot of people that I'm glad that I taught third grade for as long as I did, because lots of times when I'm at the General Assembly talking to our House and Senate members, it's like talking to my third graders, because a lot of them don't understand what teachers are doing every single day in that classroom.
Yeah.
And so that started my journey here at PSTA. I was in charge of two things: membership recruiting and lobbying. And I loved all of it because I love working with teachers and seeing teachers. And so Elizabeth retired, and the board hired me. I'm just the second executive director that we've ever had at Palmetto State Teachers Association.
Wow. Well, Kathy, going back to your early part of your sharing your story, I heard you talk about working with those doll babies in your basement and teaching them, and you had an experience. And so if there are any young people out here that are going to hear this message, or even parents of young people that see their children really good at working with kids and they're afraid to say go into teaching because all the things that they hear about teaching. But you and I, we know how rewarding teaching can be and how beneficial and how you can make a life for yourself being an educator. What would you say to that young person or that parent?
Well, I would say to them to do it. My son is going to college right now to be a teacher, and I have people say to me, are you trying to talk him out of it? Absolutely not.
Right.
I want him to be a teacher. I want him to make a difference in the lives of children, because I know I did that. And Craig King, I know you did that.
Absolutely.
When you were a third grade teacher. And that's what we need to do. We need to have parents and community members and teachers lifting up our profession. I know it's hard out there right now, and at Palmetto State Teachers Association, we are working very hard for you. But we need to encourage our young people to become an educator. And that's what I'm doing with my son, and I hope that works for him. And if it doesn't, then he'll find his path.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited that he's decided to be a teacher.
Yeah. And if you're a regular listener, you know, you will hear Patrick Kelly share a lot of the great things that we're doing and fighting for on behalf of teachers and for teachers. But Kathy, I want to go in a little bit further into our conversation and talk about our current teachers, our current members that are listening to this podcast. We can tell by the numbers that you're listening. I think we're up to almost 1,000 downloads since we started this podcast. And so people are listening. And so for the teacher out there that they feel like, you know what, I listen to this podcast on my way to work every Monday morning, and now I know what's going on. But let's talk about the importance of sharing that information with other teachers in their building, voting, while all those things, in addition to listening to our podcast and reading the land. But talk about that next step that teachers should be involved in and how it doesn't take a lot of their time.
Right. And it's so important that teachers use their voices. Right. Because I can tell you, Patrick Kelly can be there all day. Mm-hmm. I can be there all day. But the members of the General Assembly really want to hear from y'all. They want to hear from the teachers in the classroom. And we at Palmetto State Teachers Association have an advantage because Patrick Kelly is in the classroom.
That's right.
Our Director of Governmental Affairs teaches every morning and then comes to work here at PSTA and spends a lot of his time at the General Assembly. So they're hearing from a teacher when they hear from Patrick, but they really want to hear from the people back home. In the past, there have been times that I've been up there all day and all night. Yeah. I mean, I had no idea I'd be spending the night at the General Assembly.
Before Kathy keeps going, you know, I like to add a little humor in our podcast. Now, when I came on board in 2011, Kathy did share with me there was going to be some long nights, but Kathy didn't tell me I would go into the next day sometimes. But it's okay. It was great work. Advocating for teachers and students. So it was a great work.
I remember going into the night many times and calling my family when it's time for my children to get up to go to school the next morning and say, what do you want me to pick you up for breakfast? And that's when I was coming home. But we're there fighting the fight, and that's right. Important. But they want to hear from you, teachers. You have a powerful voice, and you need to use it. Just got off the phone a while ago with one of the great school librarians in South Carolina.
You can give her a shout out.
Oh, Tamara Cox is awesome.
Yes, we love Tamara Cox.
And so I was in a meeting this morning about the transparency bill. You know, we call that the CRT bill, and they want to bring in stuff dealing with library books. Well, I was right on the phone with Tamara, and she's going to be right on it because she is the expert, and that's what we need to remember. They're hearing from a whole lot of people who have no business talking about what's happening in education, but they need to hear from you because you are the expert. And I was actually beside a legislator one day last week when there were some teachers there, and he just flat out said, we want to hear from the teachers. That's who we want to hear from. We want to hear from the teachers. So use your voice. Don't go, oh no, they're an elected official, I can't talk to them. Listen, they put their pants on the same way you put yours on, and if they're one of the few women there, they put their dress on the same way you do too. There's the only thing different between you and them is that they have time to go out and get elected and to raise money. You know, a lot of them are attorneys, and you don't have that time right now. But I do want you to think about when you retire, running to be a member of the General Assembly. But they need to hear from you. So, you know, they are an elected official. Their job is to hear from their constituents. I'm an elected official too. And I'll tell you a story. Years ago when I first got elected, I had all three of my children home on the same night, which was unusual because they were playing sports and not there a lot. And I was cooking supper and the phone rang. And somebody wanted to talk to me about an issue in the town of Lexington. So they went on and ate, and I talked to my constituent. And that's what we do as elected officials. And if you feel like they don't want to talk to you, then you got to get to the ballot box. And that's one thing education people in education need to do. You need to vote because elections have consequences. And we saw that in the General Assembly this year, where we lost some strong supporters of public education because people did not go to vote. They thought, oh, that person's been there, that person will win, we don't have to worry about it. Well, that person didn't win, and it's we need to make sure that we are electing people who care about our students, who care about our public schools, and who care about you as professionals. We got to vote, we got to get registered, and you got to take people to the polls with you.
Yeah. I told you, everyone, you were in for a treat. We could sit here and talk to Kathy for hours and hours, but she told me before we got on she has something she has to get to that is in relation to fighting for you. So I'm not going to hold her long. But before we go, Kathy, we share this story a lot about the importance of the teacher voice, or even in some cases, the student voice. So can you talk about how student voices dealing with the practice core exemption, and then also the teacher voice with the lottery enhancement? Can you talk about how a teacher and student voice will make changes in our state, or has made changes?
Right. So Craig mentioned the lottery scholarship enhancement, and we are so close to getting that passed after so many years. We had a teacher cadet teacher, Jennifer Tennedy from Richland 2, who came up with this fabulous idea. Right now, in law, if students in our colleges and universities are majoring in math and science, they get what's called a lottery scholarship enhancement. They get more money from the lottery scholarship to go to school. And we have heard from young people coming out as first-year teachers about the amount of student loans they're coming out with, the amount of debt they have. So we thought, hey, science and math are hard to fill positions, but so are teachers.
Absolutely.
And we are in a teacher shortage crisis right now, and I don't care what anybody says. I am telling you, we are in a teacher shortage crisis in South Carolina. So we had legislation introduced. Thank you, Senator Massey, for doing that in the Senate for us. And we got that out of the Senate. It will add education as a lottery scholarship enhancement. So those young people who are going into education will get more of the lottery scholarship money, and we are very excited about that. We are pushing very hard to get that to the finish line this year, to get it passed in the House of Representatives. We've talked with Representative Shannon Erickson, who spoke to the teaching fellows last week, and some of the teaching fellows talked to her about that. So we hope to get that passed. That'll help our pre-service teachers as they make their journey to become a professional educator. One thing we're pushing that passed the House of Representatives last week is paid parental leave for teachers. The General Assembly last year passed paid parental leave for state employees, but not for teachers. So we got that passed out of the House. We need those senators to get that vote up and get it going before session ends on May the 11th. So we've got some big bills that we still need to get passed this year. We got some bills that are going to pass that we don't like, that we have to, if they're going to pass, we need to make them amended. So we're working on that. There's a lot going on in the General Assembly. If you're a member of Palmetto State Teachers Association, you get our Legislative Alert Network on Friday, and then again you get some talking points on Sunday morning. I need you, when it says get in touch with your House member, click on that, y'all. Make it your own and send it. That truly makes a difference. We heard last week that one legislator heard from 8 teachers in his district, and he wrote a letter to the whole school, the high school in his district, saying, I am going to support paid parental leave. 8 people, y'all. Yeah. 8 people. What if he heard from 800? What if he heard from 80? What a difference that would make. You are powerful. Use your voice because it is so powerful.
And sometimes, Kathy, I think I get it. Teachers have a hard job. We have so much going on in our daily lives. But everything in our state, from birth to death, is decided at that General Assembly.
That's right.
And so they are not only hearing or not hearing from educators, they have the huge responsibility to fund our entire state. And so if they don't consistently hear from educators, then sometimes those policies and things that you want to get passed, sometimes they become an afterthought. That's why it's important what Kathy shared. It's important that we constantly stay involved. And Patrick has made it really easy for you to do by just clicking on that link and making that message your own. But before we go, talk about the practice core exemption that you had a hand in some years ago.
Yeah, many years ago, we had a current educator actually say, I don't think people who score high on the SAT should have to take it was Practice 1 at the time. Mm-hmm. So Representative Ronnie Townsend, who is from the upstate in Anderson, was the chairman of the House Education Committee. So I called him and said, listen, I want you to put a proviso in the budget that says if you score this on the SAT, then you don't have to take Praxis 1. And his research director, Sandy Smith, who still has her hand in education and does a great job, she wrote this proviso, and it has been in there for a very long time. So when Craig talked about how the General Assembly makes decisions from birth to death, let's talk about what it does in a career of educators. From the very beginning, whether or not you have to take what was Praxis 1, it's now Praxis Core, all the way to your retirement and everything in between in your professional career, the General Assembly makes those decisions. And that is why it is so important that they hear from you. We had a group of teaching fellows last week at the General Assembly. We'll have another group next Wednesday. And I said, raise your hand if you don't have to take Praxis Core. And just about every single one of them raised their hand. They didn't have to take it. And I said, tell me why. Well, we told them the story as to why they don't have to take it and the importance of getting them involved early to advocate for our students and our profession.
Wow. And that is those are just two stories of the many stories we could share with you when teachers took it upon themselves to advocate for themselves and their profession and their students. And you see the benefit of it. And so, Kathy, thank you for joining me today on the PSTA podcast. We enjoyed hearing your background and your story of how you have made changes not only in public education, but in policy and in advocacy across our state. Any final words for our audience before we go today?
Well, for you educators who are out there, thank you for what you do every single day. I know the work is hard, but I guarantee you are making a difference in the lives of those students that you touch every day. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
With that, we will end on a high note from our Executive Director, Kathy Maness. This has been another impactful episode of the PSTA podcast. I'm Craig King, your host, and I'll see you next time.